At $0, you believe money will fix everything. You imagine it like a switch. More money, less stress. More money, more freedom. More money, a better life. So you chase it, relentlessly. Because from where you're standing, money looks like the solution to every problem you have. But then, something changes. At $1 million, you finally reach the number you once dreamed about. And for a moment, it feels like you made it. But then you notice something uncomfortable. The problems didn't disappear, they just evolved. The pressure is still there. The uncertainty is still there. The need to make the right decisions becomes even heavier. And that's when the illusion begins to crack. Because money didn't fix your life, it just changed the level of the game. And then, at 100 million, something shifts again. You stop thinking about money entirely. Not because you don't value it, but because you finally understand it. Money is no longer something you chase. It's something that moves based on where you stand. Decisions replace effort. Position replaces hustle. And the game becomes completely different. So the real difference was never the number. It was how your mind operated at each level.
You need to recapture it. Not with noise, but with curiosity. Use lines that interrupt the pattern and pull the viewer back in. But here's what nobody tells you. This is where things change. What most people miss is this. And this is where everything shifts. These aren't just sentences. They are psychological triggers. They reset attention. They create curiosity. They keep the viewer watching. And that's what builds retention.
Most people believe wealth is a straight line. Work harder, earn more, life improves. Simple, predictable, logical. But real wealth doesn't work like that. Because money doesn't just change your lifestyle, it changes how you think. At every level, the rules are different. The pressures are different. The decisions are different. And most importantly, the psychology is different. What works at 0 fails at 1 million. What gets you to 1 million keeps you stuck there. And what takes you to 100 million has almost nothing to do with effort at all. This is where most people get confused. They try to use the same mindset at every level. And that's why they stay in the same cycle, just with bigger numbers. So this isn't financial advice. This is a mental transformation. Because if your thinking doesn't evolve, your results won't either.
At 0 net worth, life feels immediate. Everything is urgent. Everything matters, right now. Time isn't an asset, it's something you sell. Hours become income. Days become survival. And if you stop, everything stops. So your decisions become short-term. You don't think in months, you think in days. What do I need to pay today? What can I afford right now? What risk can I avoid? Because at this level, loss feels dangerous. Not uncomfortable, dangerous. One mistake, one bad decision can set you back weeks or even months. So fear quietly takes control. Not loud, not obvious, but always present. And because of that fear, security starts to feel more valuable than opportunity. You choose what feels safe. You avoid what feels uncertain. You delay what feels risky, even if that risk could change everything, because your mind is trying to protect you. But in doing that, it also limits you. So without realizing it, you make a trade. You trade freedom for certainty, a stable paycheck over unpredictable growth, a known path over an uncertain one. And it makes sense, because when survival is the priority, strategy disappears. You're not thinking about leverage. You're not thinking about systems. You're thinking about getting through the week. And that's the hidden trap of this level. It's not just a lack of money, it's a lack of mental space. Because when your mind is under pressure, it doesn't think long-term. It reacts.
The biggest trap at this level isn't the lack of money. It's the lack of mental bandwidth. Because when your mind is constantly occupied by bills, deadlines, uncertainty, your ability to think clearly starts to collapse. Stress doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how you decide. You become reactive, impatient, focused on immediate relief instead of long-term gain. You avoid complexity. You delay important decisions. You choose what feels safe, not what is actually optimal. And slowly, without realizing it, your decision quality drops. Not because you're incapable, but because your mind is overloaded. At this level, strategy becomes a luxury. Because when you're trying to survive, you don't have the space to think strategically. You don't analyze deeply. You don't plan long-term. You respond. And that's what keeps most people stuck. So naturally, you start chasing income, more hours, more effort, more output. And eventually, you break through.
At $1 million, life feels different. For the first time, you can breathe. The urgency is gone. The constant pressure begins to fade. You're no longer thinking about survival. Now, you're thinking about growth. How do I multiply this? How do I protect this? How do I scale this? Your thinking expands. You start seeing patterns, systems, opportunities. Money is no longer something you chase daily. It becomes something you manage. So you begin to optimize. You track numbers. You analyze returns. You study investments. You become calculated, deliberate, strategic. You invest. You diversify. You structure your income. And from the outside, it looks like you've figured it out, because compared to before, you have control. But something subtle is still happening. Deep down, you still believe you're earning money, just more efficiently. You've reduced the chaos, but you haven't escaped the system. Your decisions are smarter, your income is higher, your lifestyle is better. But the game is still the same. You're still optimizing within it. And that creates a hidden illusion that you've reached the top. But in reality, you've only reached a more comfortable level of control. Because at this stage, effort still matters. Decisions still depend on your involvement. And your identity is still tied to performance. So you continue. You optimize, invest, calculate. You build systems, but you're still inside them. And most people never move beyond this point. because it feels like enough. But for a small percentage, this is where the next shift begins.
At this level, most people get stuck. Not because they stop growing, but because they start feeling comfortable. They've escaped survival. They've built stability. They've gained control. And that creates a dangerous illusion that this is the final level. But look closely, and you'll see the limitation. They still rely on effort. They still rely on intelligence, better decisions, more analysis, more optimization. But the structure hasn't changed. They're still trading time, just more indirectly. Meetings, decisions, oversight, management. It's no longer physical effort, but it's still involvement. And that's the hidden ceiling. Because income has increased, but position has not. You upgraded your income, but not your position. You're still inside the system, just at a higher level. And as long as you're inside the system, you're still dependent on it. That's why most people plateau here. Not because they lack skill, but because they never change the game they're playing. And then, a small percentage break out again. At 100 million, everything changes. Not just your lifestyle, but your entire perspective. You're no longer thinking about earning money. You're thinking about where it flows. Because at this level, you don't chase money. You position yourself where money already moves. Markets, networks, systems. You begin to see the structure behind everything. Who controls distribution? Where attention is going? How capital shifts? And once you see it, you stop trying to work harder. Because effort becomes irrelevant. At this level, decisions create millions. Not hours, not output, not grind. Just decisions. Where to allocate, who to partner with, what to ignore. And that changes your relationship with time. You're no longer trading it, you're leveraging it. Through people, through systems, through influence. You think in leverage, in networks, in positioning. And the game becomes quiet. Less movement, less noise, more control. Because money is no longer something you earn, it's something that moves through you. And with that comes a different kind of detachment. You're not emotionally reacting, you're not chasing outcomes. You're observing, positioning, directing. Like standing above a map, watching everything connect. Capital flows like streams. Opportunities appear in patterns, and your role is simply to align with it. Because at this level, the game isn't played harder, it's played smarter. At this level, something fundamental changes. Effort becomes irrelevant. Not because work disappears, but because it's no longer the driver. Positioning becomes everything. Where you stand, who you're connected to, what you control. These matter more than at this level, something fundamental changes. Effort becomes irrelevant. Not because work disappears, but because it's no longer the driver.
Positioning becomes everything. Where you stand, who you're connected to, what you control. These matter more than how hard you try. And with that, your role changes. You're no longer reacting to the game. You're not chasing trends. You're not responding to pressure. You're influencing how the game is played, shaping outcomes, directing flows, creating leverage. Because once you understand the system, you don't just participate in it. You start to control it.
The difference was never money. It's how you think at every level. Because money doesn't transform you. It amplifies you. And if your mindset stays the same, your life will too. Just with bigger numbers.
If you want to reach the next level, you don't need more money. You need a different way of thinking.